Dr. Stovall, nice. I mean, how long has it been? About a couple of years or 3 years? I think it's 2 years, 3 years.
Probably about 2 years.
Man, the time go by so fast, man. What changes have in academia since you're a college professor, Dr. Stovall? What's going on in academia?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to really pay attention to are budget cuts, young folks not having access to this place, especially Black and Latino youth from inner cities. So I think that's a huge piece. That's not that we're talking about college costs increasing, but there's another space to that when we talk about Black and Latino youth in the inner city. So there's already been difficult access since the early 80s for Black and Latino youth to higher education. So now with this increase in cost, now you also have an increase in test score requirements or what have you, or admissions requirements that further limit the access of those particular young folks to higher ed. We're seeing the results of that with places like I'm at here at UIC now reifies its student populace, and now you see much more white students coming from suburban areas who are now enrolling as freshmen here.
Because they actually probably downsizing because the cost of going away to school and room and board. They better off commuting to UIC versus go to U of I or some other school and pay the room and board, because room and board could be $10,000 a year.
Right, and everybody. So as a commuter institution, a place like UIC is known across the state, or especially in the Chicagoland area, as a quote unquote good deal. Right. Because they said if you can get in, you won't incur as much cost. But now even those costs are increased. So now UIC's tuition has gone up almost 47% since 2000. That's
insanity. But let's go, because I got a kid in college, so let me go with that question. You got me started. Some people have to. The rule for college is this: your debt should be no more than your first year of working. Let's say you're gonna come out of school making $30,000. That means your debt should be no more than $30,000. That's a rule, one person's theory, for expert. The point is that people are gonna have to start choosing that school is too expensive for me to go to. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think another part to think about that space in terms of it not being so much a school being too expensive, but what actual supports are there. So in Illinois, we almost lost Pell Grants. We almost lost, if it wasn't for the decision made by the Obama administration, we would have lost quite a bit of FAFSA federal funding. So I think those are the larger issues that we have to engage, because a lot of schools are still affordable, but they're affordable with those supports in tow. So I think that's another question that we have to ask on both ends.
Yeah, I got it. My son is in college, and I didn't go to college, and I don't know a lot of people who sent their children to college, so I didn't understand none of this process, and I probably made a bunch of mistakes. But there are children here in the city of Chicago, and I live in an African American neighborhood. For those who know, we're talking French now. Their EFC, their respective family contribution on the FAFSA is zero or very low. Meaning there's kids from the hood can go to a UIC or some other school at an I hate to say the term, relative affordable rate. We're not taking advantage of it. We need to talk about that. You from the hood, their institutions gonna make it easy for your son or daughter to go to college, get a college education. It's gonna be affordable. Relative affordable. We ain't taking advantage of it.
Well, I think another part of that is, to what extent do we know, right? And I think it's a huge piece, right? So it's not so, because I don't want to get into,
I'm saying ignorance. My ignorance. I didn't know. I had no clue.
So this thing around us not knowing, to what extent do we know? If you got a city like Chicago where the counselor to student ratio is like 1 to 612 students, we have to ask another set of questions, and where those counselors located. And then you got schools now that have depopulated, and now any of the support infrastructure has been taken away because of the budget cuts that now have to come with a school that's depopulated. You have to ask a different set of questions. Again, to what extent do we actually know?
And that ignorance is what's getting me. The ignorance is not our fault. Who's going to come tell us?
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Right. Who is going to tell us what we need to know, and who's going to inspire us to do what we need to do? That goes back to leadership. Where's it going to come from? Yeah. In the schools, in the neighborhoods. Right. I think, where's the leadership at?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we have to be. I always think about what Ella Baker tells us, right? We are the ones we've been waiting for. So this thing around really being clear about what are the things that we need, and then how do we go about getting those things that we need, and then being transparent in our dissemination of those things that we need. Because a lot of times folks will get in and just hoard it, right? Will tell us, will tell us this, will have this information, but won't be forthright with distributing it. And this thing is, if we're really talking about uplift, we have to be clear about how we're going to be transparent and distribute those opportunities that could increase life chances of young people in places like Chicago. Just real talk.
Dr. Stovall, college is not for everyone. I get it. But almost junior college, meaning K through 14, junior college is almost a necessity. But whether it's a 2-year, 4-year university or institution, the dropout rate in 4-year universities, colleges are really, really high. It's like 50% overall, and maybe only about 30% of African Americans actually graduate from college. So when your kids say, "Oh, I'm going to college," but statistically, they ain't gonna finish college in that 4 to 6 year span. So you're a college professor. How do you can you encourage students that say, "Listen here, you're graduating this year, next 4, 5, 6 years. What does it take for a kid who's just a regular student, C, D, A, B, doesn't really matter, from the hood or the suburban hood, how to succeed in college and don't get tripped up and go on and graduate?"
Right, with this thing around planning. I mean, I think this is big, right? So how do we support young people in executing a plan, right? So I mean, that like I said, you can deviate from a plan to what extent, but like I said, that final goal is still one that we're actually attaining. So this thing around supporting young folks in actually executing those plans that we put forward, because a lot of times, just like you said, a young person will come through and maybe have really high grades and really high abilities and just hasn't been supported in those spaces and may not know. For example, I always use the example of one of my good friends. She got into NYU on a scholarship. She goes her first semester, she tells me, she's like, "Dave, I didn't know that we had to pay for books." And I was like, man, I mean, just think about that, right? She's like, "I didn't know we had to pay for books because in high school we just went to class and the books were there." She was like, "I didn't know I needed a book stipend." But this type of stuff, I mean, that type of support that now puts us at a disadvantage, and herself being a indigenous Native American woman saying, "Wait, all this stuff is going on. Where was the support to just say, okay, here are the things that you need to know that are already assumed," right? So those types of things, that type of experience becomes heavy in terms of what it is, how we can support folks. And there are people, I think, who do it well. For example, I always tell parents, especially here in Illinois, if your son or daughter is doing well in school and may not be sure about, college finances might not be the greatest, man, Northern Illinois has a program called the Chance Program, and it's an alternative admissions program for Black and Latino students. And what they do in that program, I think, is really interesting because they support young folks, and they've actually seen those numbers increase in terms of retention. So that type of stuff really becomes
meaning that they ain't dropped out that first or second year.
That they
college retention.
That they're actually graduating.
Right.
So they keep that data. They actually pay attention to that data over time. So I mean, that type of stuff I think is really important.
We're gonna talk about crime in there, but we're going to the flow. Got to go with the flow. Students, when they pick schools, because my daughter be going to college in a couple of years, year and a half, they have to pick the school that fits them. Of course, academically, financially, and their personality. I mean, so I think picking the right school, they say, "I want to go to Howard. I want to go to Howard," but Howard may not be for you. "I want to go to Clark Atlanta. I want to go." No. You got to calm down and you got to find a school that fits. How do you find a school that fits that particular student?
I think it goes right back to that plan, right? So what are the things that you're trying to do? So that's the question that you're always asking. So college counselors, college counselors who do what they do very well, they're always asking, what are the things that you're interested in? What it is that you're trying to do? How does that place fit into what it is that you're trying to do? Have you been able to talk to faculty members and students about what's really happening here? Right, so college tours we used to pass off as just this kind of field trip to kick it. But those things are serious in terms of really taking the opportunity to figure out what is actually happening in that place. So I always tell young folks, especially if they're coming out of high school, if you're going on a college tour, make sure, it's one thing to talk to the person who's giving you a tour guide. It's another thing to talk to students and faculty while you're there. That's key in terms of kind of figuring out what happens in that institution.